We're very fortunate today to have two parliamentarians join us from New South Wales. Rob Stokes is the New South Wales Minister of Environment. He has other titles as well: Minister for Heritage, Minister for the Central Coast, and Assistant Minister for Planning. But Rob joins us here today as much as an academic as a politician. He has a PhD in law, is previously a lawyer, and an academic in environment and planning law. He's joined on the stage today by his parliamentary colleague, the Honourable Greg Pearce, and they're going to jointly speak to us today on parks, politics, and partisanship, moderating the debate on protected areas. Minister Stokes, please.
Thanks very much, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. What, might you ask, do two politicians have to contribute to the debate on reaching conservation goals? Well, one of the very critical parts in relation to reaching these goals obviously relates to questions of governance, and that's what we seek to speak to you a little bit about today. Now, we're going to do a double act. I'll start off and then I'll pass to my parliamentary colleague, Greg Pearce. I just want to spend one moment introducing Greg to you. Not only is Greg a former minister and a very experienced parliamentarian, but he's also a noted environmental lawyer, having established the first international environmental law practice and a leading Australian law firm, Freehills, in the 1980s, and was also a delegate at the Rio Earth Summit and has been involved in directorships in a number of environmental advocacy groups. So together though, with our experience in governance and in politics, we wanted to provide our unique perspective on ways in which we can help to shape the arguments and shape the discussions about reaching our conservation goals. Now, the title of our presentation is Parks, Politics, Partisanship, Moderating the Debate on Protected Areas. Our concern is that this debate has become increasingly polarised, and we want to offer a model of how to moderate this debate so that we can help debate and political discourse help rather than hinder the objective of reaching our conservation goals. The structure of the presentation is that Greg will first outline some of our concerns about the degradation of the standard of environmental dialogue, and I'll then present an argument for adopting agonism as an alternative template for negotiating protected area politics. This approach for some time has been pursued in the approach of urban planning and planning law more generally, but it's our contention that it also has merit when policy making for protected areas. Hand it over to Greg.
Thank you, Rob. There must be few areas of politics with such long-term importance as environmental politics. It's an area where our actions now will undeniably have ramifications for future generations. We can't kick these into touch. It saddens me then that the environment has also become one of the politicised and antagonistic areas of politics. The history of protected areas in New South Wales is a proud one. Royal National Park, the world's second, or some claim the first, national park, is located only 20 kilometres south of Sydney. In the almost 150 years since the establishment of the Royal National Park, we've added over 850 protected areas to the New South Wales park system, covering almost 9% of the state's areas. Both sides of politics have contributed to the development of the national park system in New South Wales. Liberal coalition governments achievements include establishing the original National Parks and Wildlife System in 1967, passing the current National Parks and Wildlife Act in 1974, banning mining in national parks, establishing key iconic national park areas such as the Gardens of Stone National Park, and only earlier this year introducing an unprecedented program of rewilding across our national parks network. Our party is proud of the place in New South Wales protected area history. Antagonism has, however, filtered into the protected areas conversation in a big way. Partisan politicking has taken over from the rational political discussion that we all like. On issues such as providing community access, managing existing community uses, economic management and acquisition strategies, the debate has often descended into sloganeering. The capacity to have a rational political discussion is being lost, and it's our view that this, in large part, is due to an increasing expectation that we should be able to reach consensus on national parks management. The focus on reaching consensus has become a leading philosophy within environmental policy over the last 25 years. The approach has its intellectual origins in the work of Jürgen Habermas during the 1980s and his theory of communicative action. It seeks to depoliticise decision-making and use an approach where, through the course of deliberations, an individual's interests are transcended to seek the good of all. The intention is we move from mere agreement to rational consensus. Consensus is at the centre with power, something to be redistributed or overcome through undistorted communication. The best argument wins over all other parties, and we end up with mutual understanding and agreement. That's the theory. In New South Wales, the design of the National Parks and Wildlife Act 1974, with its requirement for 3 levels of consultative committees for most parks and extended consultation, strongly implies an expectation for consensus at an operational level. And political debate on parks has also proceeded on the basis that consensus on protected areas management is necessary. While at a state level, this may have been exacerbated by a 16-year period of single-party government in New South Wales, a consensus-driven approach has also been apparent in Commonwealth-level political decision-making. More recently, however, thinkers such as Chantal Mouffe have started to call into question the merit of a consensus-driven approach. They've suggested that, in fact, this approach and the theory of communicative action is poorly suited to environmental decision-making. Or, as Australian academic Jean Hillier puts it, we've realised that the consensus formation strategies may have a tendency to break down. Now, this isn't an argument against engagement. The shift to more participatory democracy has undoubtedly led to more voices being able to be heard. The end point of consensus is, however, not achievable. Ironically, a quest to find unity and commonality has resulted in greater tension than if it was acknowledged that parties with different goals and intentions will not find themselves in agreement. Mouffe suggests that too much emphasis on consensus, together with aversion towards confrontation, leads to apathy and to dysfunction with political participation. Worse still, it may backfire, with the result being an explosion of antagonisms unmanageable by the democratic process. And ironically, because community action fails to capture the real politic, it results in an antagonistic outcome. An antagonistic outcome with division for the sake of division does not benefit any value group. An antagonistic outcome is the worst outcome for all outcomes. A moderated outcome requires parties to be allowed to hold and express alternative views and ideas. A battle of ideas rather than ideologies. And I'd now like to hand back to my colleague Rob.
I'm back. So as Greg outlined, we're not opposed to innovative decision support processes. We argue, however, that they cannot and they should not replace the promotion of other non-invited forms of engagement that are at once more organic, spontaneously and overtly political processes. Specifically, we propose that protected area politics should be driven not by antagonism, but instead by an idea of agonism. The term agonism comes from the ancient Greek contest of first physical, then intellectual capacity amongst citizens. Our thinking on this, as Greg's mentioned, is particularly influenced by Chantal Mouffe and Jean Hillier. They suggest that a relationship of antagonism is one that takes place between enemies, while a relationship of agonism is a contest between adversaries rather than enemies. Mouffe envisages democratic politics as a form of agonistic pluralism. We argue for a rational middle ground of controlled conflict. This requires, first of all, areas of agreement to be identified and set aside before rational debate commences on the remaining outstanding contested ideas. This debate should be about providing instead an environment in which each participant can fully explain their own perspectives, as well as actively listen to opposing viewpoints with the goal of understanding those perspectives. This approach is particularly and uniquely appropriate for managing environmental conflicts in liberal democracies, because its practice requires that society at the same time be sufficiently open to allow for political competition, while also be sufficiently stable to render such competitive engagement safe. We're going to do a paper on this, which will include a deeper consideration of how this agonistic debate should occur. It's our view that pursuing a more agonistic approach to protected area politics would also be of considerable benefit. Given the contested nature of parks with multiple land use ideals and variance in philosophy and expectation, and given the natural expectation in democracies for debate, an agonistic approach is realistic and useful. We found the work of Brugger, analysing local decision-making associated with the Grand Staircase, Escalante National Monument in Utah, especially informative. Brugger, looking to the tensions associated with the, quote, overnight establishment of this park by President Clinton on the eve of the 1996 presidential election, identified that since a diverse public is unlikely to agree about how public land should be managed, conflict over its management is inevitable. Brugger concludes that an agonistic approach based on the principles of MOVE is best suited to resolving on-the-ground conflicts. We agree, and we contend that this type of approach should also be applied to more theoretical discussions, including the increasingly polarised and vexatious debates between political representatives and in sections of the media have about protected area politics. Allowing ventilation of contested visions of management for the parks estate enables rational debate and more reasoned assessment. The outcomes will almost never be to the satisfaction of all parties. So in that sense, consensus is a utopian idea, but the outcomes will be more founded on structured thinking and rational analysis. They will therefore be better outcomes. Furthermore, the standard of conversation itself will improve. When cheap body shots are replaced by policy discourse, the risk of issues becoming demonised and groups being distracted by partisan politics is reduced. While such thinking is, from our analysis, rare in the protected areas context, we think there's considerable merit in exploring it further. This presents a significant opportunity to improve the quality of dialogue and decision-making about protected areas. As we say in Australia, let's play the ball and not the man or the person. Only then will political discussion help rather than hinder us from reaching our conservation goals.